we can start with Rhiannon. I'm going to stop sharing here. And if we could have Rhiannon kind of take over the helm here and tell us what you have found.
So share my screen with the PowerPoint.
Yes, please.
Okay. Let's see. Does that work?
It does indeed.
Cool. Okay. So for my research project, I looked at the impact of exercise on the immune system. And I looked at this just because exercise has been shown to be very beneficial to health and a preventative measure for the onset of many diseases. So I kind of wanted to dive in a little bit deeper into how it impacts the immune system. And kind of the main mechanisms I found were, one, it increases the circulation of white blood cells in the blood. And then I also found a lot of research looking at its anti-inflammatory effects. And so I kind of focused on three main mechanisms within inflammation. And those three were, it reduces adipose tissue, it controls the release of cytokines, both pro-inflammatory markers and anti-inflammatory markers, and it stimulates the sympathetic nervous system and the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which ends up releasing cortisol, which is what we talked about earlier. And so I mainly looked at inflammation, and I found that inflammation is defined as the body's natural reaction in response to damaging stimuli. And as we've seen, short-term acute inflammation is the body's natural immune response that targets foreign pathogens or tissue damage. And so because of that, in the short term, it is beneficial to our body to attacking foreign pathogens. But low-grade chronic inflammation can be harmful to the body, and it has been shown to be a large risk factor for a variety of chronic diseases because the immune system is constantly working to attack cells, which can lead to host cell tissue and organ damage. And as we've learned, typical signs and symptoms of inflammation include heat, swelling, redness, and pain. So now I'll delve into the three mechanisms of inflammation that I found. So the accumulation of body fat, which is made up of adipose tissue, has been shown to increase pro-inflammatory markers. And one of these examples is interleukin 6. And it has also been shown to decrease anti-inflammatory markers. And an example of this is IL-10. And through exercise, adipose tissue starts to decrease, leading to a decline in the amount of pro-inflammatory adipokines, which is cytokines that are released from adipose tissue, released into the circulation. So with more exercise, less pro-inflammatory markers are released. And so the immune system is not signaled to continually work to fight the injury, which can lead to less damage to the host through a reduction of inflammation. And one of the main pro-inflammatory markers that exercise can decrease is tumor necroin factor alpha. So that's one of the main pro-inflammatory markers that has been found to decrease with exercise. And then the second mechanism was cytokine activation and inhibition. And so I looked at, it came up with myokines, which is a set of cytokines that are released by muscle tissue. And one of the main ones that it looked at was IL-6. And it was interesting to look at this interleukin because it kind of had some paradoxical effects. So when it was released from adipocytes, it had pro-inflammatory mechanisms, whereas when it was released from myocytes, I found that it had anti-inflammatory mechanisms, and I forgot to put the citation in there, but I can do that. And during and after exercise, IL-6 has been found to increase the production of TNF-alpha, which is is found to reduce the production of the pro-inflammatory marker, but it's also been found to activate and increase the release of anti-inflammatory cytokines. So overall, exercise has been found to reduce pro-inflammatory markers and increase anti-inflammatory markers. And it's also found in the next article that is summarized. And then it's also been found to have a reduction in another pro-inflammatory marker, which is C-reactive protein, which is one of the main markers of inflammation. And I found this in some studies, but then I also found a study that showed that exercise does not elicit a decrease in CRP levels. And so this shows that there can still be some mixed reviews on how exercise plays a role in the anti-inflammatory response. And then the third mechanism was the stimulation of the nervous system. And as we've just talked about, so the activation of the nervous system promotes the release of catecholamines, epinephrine and norepinephrine. And these catecholamines have been found to reduce the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, which can lead to a decrease in inflammation. And then exercise also activates the HPA axis, which stimulates the release of cortisol. And as we just talked about, cortisol is a glucocorticoid that is known to inhibit parts of the inflammatory response through the inhibiting vasodilation and the movement of white blood cells to the site of injury. And so as we talked about, like acute release of cortisol could be good to suppress the immune system and suppress inflammation, but we don't want it for a long period of time because it can be detrimental to the body. And then overall in general, exercise has been shown to increase the recirculation of immune cells, including neutrophils, immunoglobulins and antibodies, and natural killer cells. And this has been found through a couple of animal studies that found that during exercise and post-exercise, the immune cells continue to circulate throughout the body. And it can enhance the immune system due to more movement of necessary immune cells to the site of injury and infection, which could increase the immune response to those specific areas. And then after looking at the mechanisms of how exercise impacts the body, I also looked at various factors of exercise that could impact how it affects the immune system. And so one of the factors was the duration of exercise. And through the research, it seems that the duration of exercise could play a big role in how physical activity mediates the inflammatory immune response. Some studies have found that high intensity exercise for prolonged periods of time can suppress the immune system. And in a study, they found that after a long high intensity race, they found an increased level of pro-inflammatory markers such as TNF-alpha and IL-6 in the plasma, which could indicate that for exercise for a prolonged period of time could be harmful to the immune system. But it has also been shown that non-prolonged high-intensity exercise has been shown to produce anti-inflammatory effects. So duration of exercise could be a major player in how exercise mediates the immune system. And then I looked at the intensity of exercise, and there's mixed results for this topic as well. Some studies found that high intensity exercise is the most beneficial in decreasing pro-inflammatory markers and increasing anti-inflammatory markers. But they found that there were not any changes in moderate intensity interval training. So this could suggest that higher intensity is better for creating more beneficial impacts on the immune system. However, another study found that acute moderate exercise, such as a single 30-minute walk, elevated anti-inflammatory markers such as IL-10 in the body. And this study did not find any effect on the number of circulating immune cells in the moderate exercise group. So based on the research, there is still some mixed results. It could be that the higher levels of intensity could be needed to enhance immune cell circulation, which could lead to benefiting the immune system, but cytokine inhibition or activation could vary with the intensity of the exercise. And then, so just as a summary slide, I kind of found due to the complexity of the immune system and the uniqueness of each individual, there's still some mixed results when looking at the direct impact of exercise on the immune system. Evidence has shown that exercise can have anti-inflammatory effects and help recirculate immune cells. And this can help through kind of preventing chronic low-grade inflammation that is found in many diseases and can be very harmful to the body. Most of the mixed results were regarding the most effective type of exercise, and that was due to the variability in the duration, exercise, and intensity and type of the physical activity. And so more research is definitely needed on that. And then also exercise is just one example of a lifestyle intervention that could be a preventative measure to inflammation and functioning of the immune system. But other factors such as sleep and diet could also play a role. And so this was also something to keep in mind, that exercise is not the only factor that can influence the functioning of the immune system, and that combining just the overall health of an individual in addition to their diet, exercise, whatnot, could impact the immune system. So overall, I found pretty good evidence to support that exercise is beneficial for the immune system, but there is definitely still some variability in mainly the different types of exercise and how it impacts the immune system. And then here's references, that just a main slide of references.
Thank you very much. So again, so this actually illustrates, we can, the little reactions. So how do we do that? All right, that was awesome.
Thank you.
So, I mean, a few of the things that she brought up, I think are really worth just kind of reiterating. One is, often when you try to find, the definitive answer, there is no definitive answer. You get some basic messaging, but then you realize what exactly is the whole story. It's hard to tell, and different studies might come up with contradictory results, and that's typical. It's typical, a lot of times you want there to be a clean answer, and it's not as clean as you wish. And lots of life is like that. Other thing, cortisol. She's talking about cortisol inhibiting inflammation, and it's used a lot therapeutically because it inhibits inflammation. Cortisol, it's another name for cortisol is hydrocortisone. People use hydrocortisone cream just because they have a rash, or they get shots, or you take prednisone. That's another one of these similar steroids if you've got poison oak, so you don't scratch yourself to death. Or your knee's always inflamed, you get shots of cortisone in your knee. And in the short term, it's really good at reducing inflammation, and that can be really useful. But in the long term, it's also inhibiting maintenance of your tissue, and your connective tissue is going to start disintegrating and stuff. So you can't, it's not a good long-term solution to inflammation, but it can be a great short-term solution. What else did I want to say there? And just that fact that inflammation is an issue for all sorts of diseases, like cardiovascular disease. You always think about, and she's talking about exercise isn't the only thing involved with inflammation. Like the mechanisms of why eating a high saturated fat diet clog up your arteries. It's not because the fat clogs your arteries. It's because of a more roundabout way that your body metabolizes the fats that creates an inflammatory response that ultimately results in the atherosclerosis. So there you have diet, which is triggering inflammation, which is triggering hardening of the arteries. So this inflammation, or bad inflammation, is definitely something to think about. And the last thing I'll say real briefly is she's talking about exercise being important for kind of reducing inflammation. Some of the fascinating studies I've read recently are showing that it also is really important for helping increase levels of neurotrophic factors. Your brain has more plasticity if you're exercising more. Your brain is more likely to rewire in good ways and learn if you are being more active. So it's, exercise, which is harder to do right now with this shelter in place. So but there's reasons to try to maintain some level of it. So cool. So maybe we can just go down the line. How about this? Stephen Kemp would like to tell us about BPPV.
Yep.
If you'd be so kind.
Sure. Let me see. Just go ahead and share screen.
Yes, please.
All right. And let's see if this brings it up.
Yeah, and we do need we do need to try to kind of keep things moving. So I do know it's tricky, but definitely try to if you can try to keep it to 5 minutes would be great.
No problem. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is an introduction to benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, which is much easier to say as BPPV. Reason I chose this topic is because I'm 95% sure I had it in the late 90s and went to the ER and it was never diagnosed. And only after learning more about it, I realized, you know what, I'm pretty sure I had this. And they didn't follow through with it. So it's just kind of fascinating to learn about that. Why can't I? Next slide, sorry. Oh, it's thinking. Sorry.
I used the spacebar for mine and it helped.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I am not sure why it's not going.
I mean, I can run it from my computer and you can just tell me when to move to the next slide if you'd like.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Let me go ahead and stop share.
Okay. Okay, hold on. So just take 2 seconds here. Okay, I need to go into share screen, PowerPoint. Okay.
Oh, great. So
the next slide, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yes, please. So how this works is that BPPV is caused by the otoliths from the macula in the utricle actually slipping out and entering into the one or more of the semicircular canals. And this creates a false sense of movement, particularly when the head is moved. The way we recognize it is that when the head is moved, the body still thinks it's moving because of the stones, and that generates a nystagmus, which is the shaking, the rapid pulsing of the eyes because you think your body is in motion. One of the interesting things about this is they noticed that nystagmus reaction from BPPV as early as 1921, but they didn't first come up with a test for it until 1952. And it wasn't until 1992 that the biomechanical explanation of the condition was actually fully hypothesized. So it's a long time in coming until we actually figured out what was going on. Right now, when people come in with BPPV, 20% of ER entrants admitteds who have dizziness, 20% of that is linked to BPPV. And if they come in specifically with vertigo, that's 52.5%. So a very high percentage of people who come into the ER actually have this. Next slide, please. So there are 3 types of BPPV, and this makes sense because you have 3 semicircular canals. You have the posterior, anterior, and horizontal. Now, 90% of these cases are of the posterior because it lays the lowest. And the most common way of getting horizontal BPPV is when you actually try to remove the stone by moving the head from the posterior. And instead of going back into the utricle, it actually goes into the horizontal canal. So the stones just move from one canal to another. And you can notice that from the different nystagmus. Now, BPV conditions within the semicircular canal, you can have canal lithiasis, which is a free-floating otolith or canalith. And that's one that can actually move through the canal freely. It has the least impairment. Cupulolithiasis is where the otolith is actually stuck on the cupula. And so that is a little bit more pronounced and less, takes longer to fade in time because of the adaptation. And canal jam, which is where the actual canal is fully jammed. And this can have significant impairment and is also the hardest to dislodge. Okay, next slide. So identification of BPPV. This is a video here. In interest of time, you can watch it on your own, but you actually get to see the nystagmus when the patient's head is rolled. It's pretty interesting. So as you go through, the first thing you would want to do in identifying BPPV, check for other medical conditions first, because if the patient has nystagmus without the head rolling, this could be a condition, a neurological condition that's going on. So you want to make sure that it's not a medical or a neurological condition before moving forward. Next, you would administer the Dix-Hallpike test, and these are specific head rotations and body rotations that trigger the nystagmus. And then you can actually identify which side and which canal the blockage is on based on the direction of the nystagmus. You can also figure out what type of blockage it is, if it's just a free-floating stone or if it's on the cupula, based on the latency. That's how long it takes for the nystagmus to begin after rotation, and also how long the nystagmus goes on after the rotation. Okay, next slide. So causes. The vast majority of these causes are idiopathic. We don't know why it happens. People just present. But they do know that it can be caused by inner ear infections and also by chronic diseases such as high blood pressure, also through migraines as well. There are types of migraines that can trigger this sort of issue. And physical trauma, as you might expect, like these stones getting knocked loose. So a concussion, but also indirect trauma. For instance, just loud noises. There have been reports of people having BPPV as a result of cannon fire, being near cannon fire. There was one interesting report of 4 friends who were on a mountain biking course with jumps and ramps, and they all came down with BPPV with vertigo just because of the severe force of the mountain biking. And another one that was kind of interesting, a woman who was working out at a gym used one of those whole body plate massagers that you stand on, and she got BPPV as well. Lastly, age. As our body deteriorates, you become much more prone to this, especially for those over 35. Let's see, I think the median initial onset was age 49 that people would see this.
How is
All right.
35 getting older? Wait.
Let's see, misdiagnosis of BPPV. So it can be misdiagnosed, and at times that can be dangerous. The test, the Dix-Hallpike test, has an 80% positive prediction rate, but a 50% negative prediction rate. So just because if it seems to rule out BPPV, there's actually a good chance that it may be BPPV. With subjective BPPV, that's when you have no nystagmus, but the dizziness or vertigo is present. And this is actually attributed to otoliths being in the semicircular canal. And the way to check this is to actually do the repositioning maneuvers and see if the dizziness actually goes away. And pseudo BPPV, this is where you have all the hallmarks of BPPV, but it's not actually attributed to that. Some of the ailments that can cause this are Meniere's disease, vestibular migraine. In my paper, there was actually a case of someone who had MS, multiple sclerosis, and they thought it was BPPV, but after doing brain imaging, they found, oh my gosh, it's actually MS. So next slide. So treatment, basically treatment is just moving the head and body in the right way to get the stone out of the canal. The most common are the Epley and Semont maneuvers. These are modified in clinical practice usually, and they can both be done at home independently. And movements are site specific, so you have to know which ear it's actually happening in. Okay, next. And this you can go ahead and take a look at later if you want. This is just someone doing the Epley maneuver. If you're interested, it's kind of fascinating. And here's how you do it at home. Again, 20% of dizziness cases attributed to BPPV. And 90% of these are with posterior canal lithiasis. And one thing I found really fascinating in doing this research was the impact it had in emergency departments. There was a great research paper on training ER staff on how to identify this, not only to reduce costs, because there'd be less imaging, but also to provide instant relief. Because it's biomechanical, it's one of those rare things where you perform the maneuver and all of a sudden the person's not dizzy anymore. And one nurse said, it's like one of those things that you rarely get in emergency medicine where you can literally cure them. I literally cured her. It was just the most rewarding feeling. And I think that's pretty awesome. And you hear how much they're going through in ER departments now with COVID. Like, we can't do anything. We can just kind of triage and get people through. This was something to read about where it's like, yeah, we can actually do it. So next slide. And that's it. Sorry, I rushed a bit, but it was a fascinating topic for me.
Yeah, no, so that I find that's, I mean, my graduate work was on the ear. So this is, I've heard of this, but I didn't know it in this depth. This is very fascinating. And it's also, it needs a better name. It's like,
yeah.
I think if it had a easier name, people would probably remember it more, be more aware of it. It's like BPPV. All right.
Yeah, stone ear syndrome.
Exactly. All right. So next we are gonna go. Does anybody want to be the next one, or we can go down the row, or does anybody?
I can go next to get it over with.
All right, Amanda is going to go next here. Let us see. You have to share your screen. And Amanda will tell us about the effects. So we heard about exercise on inflammation. Now let's hear. That's another nice thing. A lot of these are related, but have from different angles, which is another nice thing to watch things kind of start connecting together.
Okay, so I did my paper on the effects of exercise on hypertension. And I chose this because last year, at the age of 29, I was actually diagnosed with hypertension. I was dealing with the effects of hypertension for years, and they didn't want to diagnose me because I was so young and not overweight. But finally they did, and I've been on medicine twice a day for a year, and it's really helping. But this topic really fascinates me. What we're going to learn today is what exactly is hypertension, what causes it, why is hypertension bad, Is exercise good for hypertension? What is the best exercise for hypertension? What effects does working out have on your blood pressure post-exercise? And how long should a person with hypertension work out if they want to see a noticeable difference in their blood pressure? So what is hypertension? So hypertension is pretty much persistent elevated blood pressure. And we all know that a normal blood pressure is generally 120 over 80. So hypertension would be classified as anything above 140 over 90, and that's every single day. What causes hypertension? So there's a lot of different things that can cause it: our genes, our race, or our gender, and then a lot of common environmental factors that a lot of us can see here: sedentary lifestyle, stress, obesity, our age, our salt intake, and our alcohol consumption. So let's talk about that a little more. If you're sedentary, if you have a sedentary lifestyle, it's extended periods of inactivity, and it can reduce your metabolism and impair the body's ability to regulate blood pressure. Emotional stress, this is a big one that can cause hypertension. It leads to activation of the sympathetic nervous system, and this leads to increased cardiac output and increased systemic vascular resistance, which raises your blood pressure. A big one in America is obesity. Having an overabundance of fat in our blood causes blood vessels to become blocked, and your pressure has to raise in order to keep up. Age. As we age, we have many structural changes in our arteries, and they start to stiffen, causing the likelihood of blood pressure to be much higher. And another one across America, we all like salt. Heavy salt diet disrupts the body's sodium balance. The kidneys have trouble keeping up with all the excess sodium, and the sodium accumulates. The body holds on to water to dilute the sodium, and this leads to an increase in both the amount of fluid surrounding the cells and volume of blood in the bloodstream. This means the heart has to work harder, and the extra work constricts the blood vessels, causing a rise in the pressure. Why is hypertension bad? Hypertension is known as the silent killer because a lot of people will be walking around and they never know they have it, and then one day they drop dead of a stroke or drop dead of a heart attack. So it's really bad. It can also cause a stroke, as we know. It can really mess with your eyes, cause vision loss. Heart failure, heart attack. It can cause kidney disease and kidney failure, ultimately leading you to a life of dialysis if you can't get a transplant. And it can also cause sexual dysfunction. Is exercise good for hypertension? Every paper that I read shows that yes, it's pretty much anybody would recommend it. So let's find out what kind of exercise and why it's good. The best exercise for hypertension, through all of the articles I read, two of the top were aerobic exercise, which is anything from cycling, swimming, walking, running, skipping, hiking. I mean, you can be playing in the backyard with your kids, cleaning out your garage. This is all aerobic exercise. Or you can lift some weights, so weight training. The effects of exercise on blood pressure post-workout: decrease in renin-angiotensin activity. It's known to lower systolic pressure in a person with hypertension by up to 5/7 millimeters of mercury. And the effects can last up to 22 hours post-workout and increase happiness due to overall feeling better. So that's always good. How long should a person work out before they see results? In order to effectively reduce blood pressure and keep it down, a person needs to exercise moderately, at least 150 minutes a week, or vigorously, so really hard, for at least 75 minutes per week. And you should always check with your physician before starting your workouts. And here's my references, and that is it.
All right. So thank you very much. Again, I forgot we can do our little, because try to make people, because normally when someone's done talking, everyone's like, so thank you. So there's more reasons why exercise is definitely something to try to keep up on. And blood pressure, I mean, that's why we spend a lot of time in class looking at all these different things that affect blood pressure and the mechanisms of all these blood pressure meds, because you're going to be running across them constantly, because most people end up on them, especially as they get older. So having an understanding of what they're doing in your patients and stuff is going to be really helpful for you, and or yourself if you're taking them yourself. All right, anybody want to go next?
I can go next.
All right, so let's have Paloma and your cute little dog and cat.
Would you be able to share my presentation?
Yes, hold on one second. It'll take me a few moments here.
Sorry about that. Thanks.
What's it called again?
Dancing's health effects.
There it is. Give me a few moments. View page display, single page. Share. Hold on, I gotta get to share. Share screen. Okay. Just tell me when to hit next.
Okay. You can hit next. So just a quick intro of why I chose dance. I am a ballroom dancer. I danced for 13 years, and personally, I saw a lot of positive effects on my health, even after I stopped dancing. So I was just curious to try and see if there's any studies that have shown actual results in other people, or if it's applied in any clinical settings to see if dance can help patients. And what I did find was that there is dance movement therapy. So it was established a long time ago in the 1940s and started becoming more popular in the 1990s. But it's basically dance used as a form of therapy or rehabilitation. It's used to help symptoms in different diseases, and it's also been seen to slow the progression down of different diseases, as well as just improve overall mental health. And it provides a social interaction, it provides exercise, and it also provides mental engagement. Can you switch the slide? So how can it affect someone? These are the main ways that I saw it affected the patients. So social and interpersonal skills, balance, mobility, stress, anxiety, and depression relief, weight control, personal confidence, and overall quality of life. All of these kind of mesh together. Later on, you'll see that it has more direct effects with specific diseases. But overall, no matter what you're suffering from, or even if you're not suffering from anything at all of these were always improved. And you can see in the picture, it's from one of the studies. Almost all of them, a majority of people felt like everything was improved after they started dancing. So a lot of these studies had people dance twice a week for 45 minutes or an hour a week, and then see how it affected their health or specific numbers of what they're looking at, and also just surveys of how they're feeling. Next slide. So one of the main ways that I saw it affected people was just social and psychological ways. So a study in Korea had women aged 41 through 65 dancing. They were line dancing, and they wanted to see how that affected their lives, what it improved, because they are at high risk for mental illness and just high mental stress because of menopause, and also different family factors, children growing up, their husbands retiring, and that puts a lot of stress on them. And the study documented that with line dancing together in a group setting, their mental health was improved, stress was reduced because they had a healthy outlet, and they were able to discuss different topics between one another, and it helped them relax and feel like they have somewhere to speak. In addition to providing just a healthy mental outlet. It's an activity. It's a form of exercise, and it was shown that it improved their muscle strength, their endurance, and that also further built their self-confidence and mental health because they felt better overall. Next slide, please. So this is different pathologies that were affected by dance. So this study had different types of dance, and this was all the ways that it was able to improve the lives of people struggling with whatever the disease is. And it's shocking that over such, like, there's so many various diseases, and it was able to improve so much. It was able to improve walking, muscle strength, provide a healthier BMI and a lot of diseases. Can we go to the next slide? So one fascinating way that it was used was in stroke recovery. Post-stroke recovery patients were rehabilitated with dance, and a study was done to see if it's a viable option as therapy in a clinical setting. And so they were given 45-minute dance classes, and they were modified to each patient based on what they could handle post-stroke. And what was seen was that 75% of the patients that participated in this felt like they enjoyed it and that they wanted to continue dancing after. So one of the main reasons why it was a positive experience was that it was interesting. It wasn't just rehab. It wasn't just some kind of physical exercise. It was an event that happened with multiple people, got to enjoy it and got to see other people, listen to music. And it also increased their strength, their mobility, their balance and endurance, and rehabilitated them post-stroke. And it was really great because it allows for a really customizable and flexible rehab option, because you can always change how hard the dance is, how much physical activity they have to do. And it makes it really easy to apply to anybody, no matter who they are. Next slide, please. So one of the most interesting to me was its effects on infections and type 2 diabetes. So they took women with type 2 diabetes and measured their neutrophil levels and neutrophils that were damaged or had fragmented DNA. And basically, after dancing, it was a 60-minute dance class twice a week that was very structured. And after their dance classes, after a certain amount of time, their neutrophils were living longer, and that was supported by the exercise that they were doing. And it helped protect them from inflammation and protect them from infection because they had healthy neutrophils that were ready to fight infection for them. And those numbers were much worse before they started dancing. And I found it really interesting that even for inflammation and infection, dance could help. Next slide. So why is dancing a good option? Like I said, it's highly customizable. It doesn't matter who you are or what you're doing. There were certain diseases where if you're wheelchair bound after a spinal cord injury, they had patients who were able to dance even in a wheelchair, just to have social interaction, to still keep moving, and it helps improve the quality of life. So that ties into having multiple benefits. It's not just one activity. It's not just an exercise. It's a creative outlet. And studies have shown that there's a lot of promising data that proves a lot of long-term effects, but there's still a lot to learn. Next slide. So there definitely needs to be more research done. A lot of these studies basically show positive effects of using dance as therapy and show positive numbers, but it only proves dancing is good, but it doesn't show how it's unique to any other type of exercise. So it doesn't show like, oh, well, when they danced, they had this amount of improvement, but when they just did like running or some other type of exercise, they had this much. So that's a big place for me. I think there needs to be more research because it doesn't really differentiate between the two. And not all the research I could find was in depth enough. A lot of studies said that this is kind of a start. It's a positive start, but there definitely needs to be more research to be able to definitively say if this could be used. So there definitely needs to be more research, but I think it should be done, because I think if people can get therapy in a positive way that improves their lives in more ways than just one, I think it could be really great. That's it.
Cool. All right. So yeah, make sure in general, want to remember that we strongly support, but proving is always a little, sometimes you get into trouble, because like we saw, like in the very first talk, even a lot of times there's conflicting results from a particular study. So in general, I think it's important, saying supporting is probably safer, but in general, I think this is also trickier with this stupid COVID thing. Like, it's a lot weirder to just like dance in your living room and watch other people on Zoom dancing with you at the same time. And it's just weird. It's way more fun to be able to go out someplace and dance for real, but it sounds like it's still worth dancing in your living room. So if you could release actually that's me now. I'm going to release the sharing here, and we are going to go and maybe do one more before we take our break.
Can we do it?
So Megan yes, that sounds great.
Okay.
Go for it. So so Megan and Camille, you can both like kind of have your microphones on and kind of share the stage here.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm.
You got it.
Yeah. Good. I can't see. Oh, sorry. No, it's not working. Sorry. I don't know. I can see all of what I have.
It looks good. No, you had it.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, we see it. Health Benefits of Drinking Red Wine by Camille Jouzot and Megan Oak.
So we chose that for my part because as a French person, I thought it was pretty interesting to know a little bit more about red wine. And I heard so many times before when I was in France that, my grandpa said so many times that drinking red wine is good for your health. So I was like, well, let's take a look at it and know more about it. So it's a traditional beverage and has been like associated with benefits and also disadvantage effects. Alcohol, wine is made principally of alcohol, phenolic, resveratrol, and flavanol. And so it has been like shown for different studies that the consumption of beneficial effects on gut microbiota, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and also osteoporosis, and some about neurological disease and cancer too. With Megan, we chose to be more focused on the gut microbiota and cancer. So which is gonna be my part, and Megan chose to talk a little bit more about cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So for what I found about microbiota, in that, so we all know that the large intestine is an active fermentation site, and there's different bacteria species in a high level of concentration in the colon. So one of the studies I found, I thought it was pretty interesting, is that they took 10 volunteers males. They were all healthy, and they have like a certain amount of dealcoholized red wine during 20 days. And they did some studies about the fecal DNA. And what they found after 4 weeks of the study, they show an increase in the number of gut bacteria and a decrease in systolic and diastolic blood pressure and triglyceride too. and also a decrease of total cholesterol and HDL cholesterol and a C-reactive protein concentration. So overall, in this study, what they explain is that red wine can regulate the growth of select gut microbiota in humans, and which can be indicated as a possible prebiotic benefits, which prebiotic like helps the probiotic, which like probiotic kind of eats prebiotic and help for a good health gut. I also like another study about gut microbiota, which I found like really interesting too. It was kind of with the same study with the consumption of a glass of wine per day, which is like seen as a moderate consumption of red wine. After a month, they found like the phenolic metabolites was higher, and that showed stability of the subject's proper microbiota composition. So which like explain, I would say that, like there is a capacity to metabolize wine polyphenols and between humans, and it's pretty different depends of the person, but it helps to like keep your proper composition and have a good good microbiota. I also found about the cancerous cell. So I was like I didn't like could find something about cancerous cell. I went to find some study, but I was not really sure about what I could find. But I found this study, which like two studies make me like, oh, that was pretty interesting. This one was about, so they explained that estrogen plays a major role in the development of breast cancer. And aromatase is an enzyme that synthesizes estrogen. So in breast tumors, the expressions of aromatase is increased compared to non-cancerous tissue, producing more estrogen. And they found that grape juice contains chemicals that act as inhibitors of aromatase. So they used that on a mouse model, and in which they like overexpressed aromatase in the mammary tissue. And the force feeding of red wine extract completely revoked aromatase. So this induced the abnormal increase in the number of cancerous cells and other abnormal cell growth in mammary tissue. So it showed like a pretty good benefit for the cancerous cell. But I was also like, well, red wine is also alcohol, and we all know that alcohol can have like dangerous effects on your body. So another like study found that they compare ethanol with red wine, so pure ethanol. And what they found is that the result has shown that the low concentration of ethanol increase the cell proliferation of breast and esophageal cancer. And however, a higher concentration slowly decreases the rates of the proliferation. And in the other side, for the red wines, it restrains also proliferation of different human cancer. And so this study also shown the inhibition of effect of the red wine of the formation of human breast. So when they compare ethanol and red wine has reduce all the transcription of genes for the cancer and inhibits effects for the formation of new cancer. This experiment provides more evidence that red wines may contain some components which are able to inhibit human cancer and cell growth and colony formation.
Do you want to just click the slide when I tell you to, since it's on your end? Okay, thanks. Okay, so I did my section on the benefits of red wine with diabetes. So it's we all know that, eating a good healthy diet and exercising can help prevent diabetes, but also red wine does play a factor in helping prevent it as well. So the wine contains a polyphenolic compound, which is really important, and it can help with certain benefits such as like anti-inflammatory effects, lipid regulation, and positive effects in antioxidants. But it's important to remember while like consuming wine, it's beneficial in the sense that you have to do a light or moderate alcohol consumption for the individual. So like women, they should have no more than 1 glass of red wine a day, and for men, it should be between like 1 to 2 glasses a day. And if you stick to that regimen with not increasing and doing a higher consumption of the alcohol, the red wine and the polyphenolic compounds can actually help with a lower risk of mortality, coronary artery disease, type 2 diabetes, heart failure, and stroke. So I did, do you mind going to the next one? So I looked at a few experiments that were around like carotid plaque formation, which is a big part with diabetes. And they took a bunch of participants, and out of the participants, there's 204, and out of all of them, 174 people had detectable plaque as their baseline. So then they took the participants and assigned them to drink the red wine, and they had them do this for 2 years. And then after the 2 years, they found that the plaque was actually reduced significantly compared to the baseline from the original image from 2 years previous. Do you mind going to the next one? Thank you. So then I also focused on cardiovascular disease, and the red wine helps with cardiovascular disease as well because of the high concentrations of the polyphenolic compounds. And the compounds in the red wine seem to be like extremely crucial. So both alcohol and these compounds, they've been extensively studied surrounding like the health benefits of cardiovascular disease, and like the underlying mechanisms explain the beneficial effects against the coronary heart disease, and that the red wine and these compounds, they increase the high density of lipoprotein cholesterol, and they decrease the platelet aggregation and a reduction of levels in fibrinogen, and they increase the insulin sensitivity. But just like maintaining just a moderate amount of alcohol can help with the beneficial sides, alcohol abuse, of course, is going to cause medical problems, and it can kind of counteract like the benefits that you're trying to do with the red wine. Do you mind going to that slide? Thank you. So I focused more on studies with the cardiac, with people. They did studies that showed like the moderate consumption of alcohol and how it decreased cardiovascular disease, hypertension. It can help with diabetes, types of cancers, including colon, ovarian, and prostate. So there's still, so the polyphenolic compound is, one of them, the compounds is called Recirculation. It's considered the most effective wine compound because it aids in the prevention of the coronary heart disease, because it provides more antioxidant properties. But they're still doing studies because it's a little uncertain about the health benefits and if they're attributed solely because of the consumption of red wine due to the presence of alcohol, or if it's due to the antioxidant compounds other than the presence of alcohol in the red wine itself. But overall, they're seeing that, if you have maintain a moderation of red wine, it can help with the prevention of heart disease, diabetes, helps with the gut, as Camille said, and also with certain types of cancers. But it's important to remember that's all about moderation, and that it may sound like nice to be able to like consume alcohol and helping with your health benefits, but it's remember to keep it limitation to that and not do an extensive amount of alcohol. Thank you.
All right.
And we
Do
also put like all the link of the articles. So you just have to click on it and you can.
right. That's so cool. So it sounds like from all of these talks, like we should be doing more dancing and drinking red wine. We want to be healthy. And my understanding too is like my experience, like a lot of the French red wines tend to actually be lower alcohol. Like for whatever reason, wines have started becoming high, beer as well for that matter, has become higher and higher alcohol. So in places like in France where wine is much more just like an everyday drink, the actual alcohol concentration isn't nearly as high as what you would get in a lot of like a California red. So that I think also helps balance the negative effects of the alcohol versus the positive effects of other reasons why it's good to drink it. So awesome. So let's take a break. I mean, in reality, we're not going to get through everybody right now. We'll have to figure out how we're going to take care of that. But if you particularly burning to be presenting, think about that. And when we come back in 10 minutes, we'll continue with some more presentations. So let us take a break and return at 11:37. That'll be 10 minutes from now. All right, welcome back. All right, so we have just heard. Yes, I mean, so you can see this is actually really nice. People have done really nice work on really interesting topics, and also it's nice. It's been nice for me to see that people have been working on things that are also personal to themselves. To actually kind of see how this connects to something you're actually passionate about. So, and I'm open to anybody going next, or I can pick somebody. Oh, Emily has her hand, so
I can go.
let's have Ms. Emily Prescott.
All right. Let's see. Let me get this going.
She will be talking about an exploration of sleep and the importance of sleep health for athletes.
What is happening? There we go. All right, can you guys see my screen and hear my voice?
Yep, it all looks good.
Okay.
But it's in conclusion.
That's the conclusion. All right. Yeah, so I wanted to look at sleep health for athletes because I used to play college sports, and I think a lot of people don't focus on it in college. And then also being an elite athlete, I think it takes a lot of intricate detail to increase your performance. And then all of that, I think this research can be applied really to the general population. So I think it's a good way to look at it, a good vision to look at it through. So I want you guys to think about who or what is robbing your sleep. Is it your children? Is it stress, screen time, pain? Diet, exercise, and sleep are the three pillars to strong health, and ignoring one can cause the other to suffer. For athletes, sleep is important for improving performance, avoiding injury, and decreasing mental fatigue. So we learned a lot about this in class this semester. But looking at what is sleep, so one definition of it is sleep is a neurobehavioral state that we enter upon slumber with relative perceptual disengagement from and unresponsiveness to the environment surrounding us. We go through sleep stages, non-REM and REM. And for the typical healthy adult, stage 2, which is in that non-REM state, it makes up 50% of your sleep cycle. Stage 3 makes up 20%, and REM makes up 20%. And those earlier stages of non-REM stages are considered slow wave stages. Slow wave sleep is said to be the most restorative. So metabolic activity slows to its lowest point. Things like you breathe slower, your heart rate drops, you got lower cerebral blood flow. The pituitary gland increases growth hormone secretion, and the nervous system can recover and use sleep as time to process learning and memory. You have a really awesome internal system, but your own biological clock. I thought this whole system was pretty interesting to look at. But you're truly synchronized with the light of the day. So when light starts to occur early in the morning, your systems use that light and kind of start to wake up. And so same for when you're going to sleep at night, when it starts to get dark, your systems naturally want to go into a restful state. So the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus is responsible for timing sleep-wake behavior, metabolism, and physiology with the circadian system. When disrupted, sleep can take a toll and has shown to be linked to metabolic disease, cancer risk, neurological disease, and mood disorders. So for elite athletes, many factors can disrupt sleep. One thing I looked at was the circadian rhythm. I think some of this definitely applies to everybody's lifestyle, but their circadian rhythms can be interrupted by frequent travel across time zones, being exposed to bright stadium light at night, excessive blue light from electronic devices, and high levels of stress. Exposure to late night bright light and blue light from screens specifically can delay the circadian rhythm and suppress the release of melatonin, an internal timing signal to enter the sleep phase. Other things that I looked at were those cortisol levels from high stress. You really have these natural phases of cortisol in your system. And for athletes who go through really high stress, they're in these long, hours long periods of time of high stress, and that can really impact their natural sleeping cycle. So sleep deprivation has a negative effect on athletic performance. So studies have shown decreased running performance, decreased muscle glycogen concentration, decreased strength, and time to exhaustion. Negative cognitive effects include decreased mood, vigor, which is a subjective feeling of energy and enthusiasm, and also confusion. And then a lack of quality sleep also impairs reaction time, judgment, and decision making, all of which play a pivotal role in competition outcome when high cognitive performance is needed. So using recovery strategies can up your game. Recovery strategies may be required to reduce post-match fatigue, reduce risk of injury, and regain performance levels. Tools such as sleep hygiene, light therapy, and dietary recommendations can help foster healthy sleep and in turn heal your body. So I thought these recommendations were nice to look at. So if anybody is having sleep issues at home, these are kind of some nice little tools you can maybe try and use. So for one example would be, don't go to bed until you're really sleepy. Sometimes we're like, oh man, I need to go to bed early, but you might not even be ready to go to sleep. So preparing yourself to go to sleep with nightly routines, maybe you like to read or take a hot shower, etc. So those are kind of interesting to look at. Light therapy was also interesting. I think there needs to be a lot more research on this, but some tools that people have used are blue blocker lights, so like lenses, blue blocker lenses. So you can wear them while you're looking at computer screens or such, but it really delays or keeps that bad light from entering through your eyes. And so your body can naturally produce those melatonin hormones when it needs to. And then also red light therapy was actually shown to increase melatonin. So some athletes were doing red light therapy after late night competitions, and then that helped them kind of calm down, relieve the stress, and get into a good sleep cycle. And then one important thing for athletes is fueling their system. So you can fuel for your matches and your competition and your practice, but you can also fuel for your sleep. So a couple of things I found interesting. There's so much research on this. It's hard to kind of find really, I don't know, there's just a lot of research on it. So I picked a couple of things that I thought were interesting. Some foods you can eat to promote sleep are tryptophan, which is an essential amino acid for the body and a precursor to serotonin and melatonin. It's found usually in milk, turkey, chicken, fish, eggs, etc. You can take melatonin in supplements, or you can get it from milk too, and it's shown to positively affect transition from wake to sleep and can enhance sleep quality or duration. Carbohydrates are good to eat before you go to sleep. They've been shown to complement concentrations of the tryptophan in the blood also. And then one I actually hadn't heard of, but I thought I wanted to do more research on, is that tart cherry juice has the ability to circulate melatonin levels, and it has anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties, which have shown to reduce muscle soreness and inflammatory response. So in conclusion, we cannot live without sleep, and increasing our understanding and awareness of it really can help us. For elite athletes, one thing that could actually improve their performance is honing in on their sleep. And there's also a lot of really cool technology out there now that can track your sleep. So I think there's going to be more research going into that. And then I also think that more research on our circadian rhythms and the hormones released during that cycle would be really interesting to look at as well. That's it.
Right. Do our little Thank you very much. That's interesting because I actually have noticed somebody recently when I was Zooming with them who was wearing these weird tinted glasses. Like, what are those? And it's exactly what you're talking about. I guess this kind of theory about trying to minimize certain wavelengths, to mess up with your circadian rhythm if you're like Zooming all night and stuff. So fascinating. Cool. All right. Who would like to go next?
Jacob, I can go.
Well,
All right. Anya. And is it Jacob?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So you've got the stage here.
Okay. How do I do this?
Just share screen.
Wait, I clicked share screen. I don't think it's going. Jacob, do you want to try?
One sec.
I mean, worst case, I can do it for you. So Jacob, can you? Yeah, it looks like Jacob's doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can just tell him.
This thing needs to get out the way.
Just press present.
All right, there we go.
Loading. All right, looks like you're good to
Is it
go.
on?
Okay, so we did ours on creatine phosphate supplementation and exercise performance. We found this interesting because like a lot of people, or we have some friends our age that do creatine and supposedly helps with exercise performance. So we wanted to see if evidence backs that up. Next slide. Okay, so yeah, our belief to be tested / research was creatine supplements increase strength, build muscle, and improve performance. And how the creatine works is you have the creatine phosphate, and then the phosphate group from the creatine phosphate gets added to ADP to produce ATP that the muscle uses for energy. Next slide. Creatine background. So it's a basic muscle energy store, especially in the fast twitch muscles, the glycolytic fibers. They use anaerobic metabolism to produce powerful high tension contractions, and they tire out quickly. So because they tire out quickly, it can only be used, the energy is used for like 5 to 8 seconds.
This responses occurs primarily within the so-called HPA axis. They both found
Next.
It's made in the kidneys, completed by the liver, stored in skeletal muscles. And you can obtain this through your diet, but people also take it in the form of creatine supplements. So they'll have like powder that they can add to like drinks and stuff. Next. Various tests have been performed. So one of the ones that we found is the effects on anaerobic activity. And there was one experiment. Here, the subjects took creatine or a placebo every day for 6 weeks. They did the high intensity workout, which was the back squat and bench press at the beginning and end of 6 weeks. Oh, no, go back. Okay, so for the back squat, the results, we saw that the creatine group saw an increase of 13.4%, and the placebo group actually saw a decrease of 0.02%, but that's not very big at all. The bench press for the creatine group saw an increase of 5.9%, and the placebo saw an increase of 0.7%. So this experiment basically is evidence that the creatine is associated or has a positive correlation with anaerobic activity. Next slide. Okay. Another experiment was on like the short bursts, such as weightlifting and sprinting, but this one specifically was on cycle sprints. So it was a double-blind randomized experiment. 23 male cyclists completed 5 15-second sprints with 2 minutes of recovery in between. Some took creatine and the others took placebo. And then we saw that there was a 4% increase in peak power and 5% increase in mean power for those that took creatine. And for placebo, there was no change. So this is the short bursts, like weightlifting and sprinting. These use the anabolic metabolism or
Anaerobic.
metabolism. Yeah, so this is another experiment that shows the positive correlation between creatine and activity performance, specifically with the anaerobic activity.
So then we took a look at creatine supplements with aerobic activity. And this was a double-blind experiment with young male and female soccer players. And they, based on their body mass, they took 20 to 30 grams of creatine for 6 to 7 days, followed by 5 grams for 1 to 9 weeks. And soccer players really rely on their anaerobic metabolism. And by the end of the season, it was clear that creatine supplementation had no benefit to the players whatsoever.
For the aerobic performance, yeah.
Aerobic activity. So what can affect creatine uptake? Creatine supplementation increases muscle phosphocreatine content and correlates with increased performance in some, but not all individuals. So we saw how someone's diet, exercise performance, and even their age can affect how creatine is uptaken in their body. Then ingestion of carbohydrates in the presence of electrolytes can increase creatine uptake as well, including warm water and tea that could also make the dissolving process of the creatine supplements much easier. So now talking about how age can affect creatine uptake. In this double-blind experiment with 20 males, ages 55 to 70, were either placed in the creatine group or in the placebo. And they did high-intensity resistance training for 12 weeks while taking the supplement on training days within 60 minutes of the workout. And their initial physical fitness of these men could have been an effect, but there was eventually no increase to their body composition or muscle weight. So other potential benefits include enhanced glycogen, carbohydrates levels, and once they reported that co-ingesting creatine with carbs and proteins increased muscle creatine retention. And since muscle recovery is highly promoted by glycogen, glucose storage in the body, creatine supplementation can help athletes who deplete glycogen levels after performance maintain their optimal level of glycogen. So additionally, improved recovery after an extensive exercise performance and throughout the exercise, gain greater gains in muscles mass when combined with strength. So what can we conclude in our research is that creatine supplementation is correlated with an increase in performance involving anaerobic activity, high intensity workouts, but not performance involving aerobic activity, endurance field activity. But creatine supplement uptake does depend on the individual, and not everyone is the same and everyone will take it indifferently, as well as carbohydrates and electrolytes can increase creatine uptake. So we could say that our research does support the popular belief that creatine supplementation can increase exercise performance, although we have found that many things can affect whether or not creatine is used to its full potential effectively. And then citations, and that's it.
Right. Cool. Alrighty, so that's, yeah, so I guess it depends a lot on like your level of performance and what kind of stuff you do, whether or not that's going to make sense to explore more. But yeah, I mean, because it's not obvious. Like we know that it's a critical part of anaerobic, mobilizing of ATP in your muscle, but how much taking it just as part of your diet affects. So it's interesting to see that there's a minimal positive effect like that. Cool. All right. Who's going next?
I can go next.
It's Dana.
Okay.
Dana Hawkins.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And share.
Oh, this is kind of what I was talking about a little bit, exercise
Yeah,
and the
that's why
neurotrophic.
I thought that was cool that you mentioned it, 'cause I did a whole paper on it. How do I get, okay, so I see that you guys are seeing this.
Present, where it says present, you just touch
Yeah,
present.
okay. Oh, okay. And then, yeah, so I can go with my, okay. So yeah, exercise influences neurogenesis in the brain. I thought that I've usually used exercise all throughout college and high school as a way to like ease my stress. So, I mean, for me, it was interesting to think about a different aspect of it, which is how it can contribute to the growth and development of nervous tissue, which is what neurogenesis is. And, you know, it was once assumed that neurogenesis was only happening during a specific developmental window, but you know, as more research comes out, it's kind of being seen that there is adult neurogenesis and it's happening throughout the entirety of an individual's life. And so the aim of my research was to see, you know, how does exercise increase neurogenesis or, you know, and maintain neuroplasticity? And the neurotrophic hypothesis suggests that in response to physical exercise, there is a release of neurochemicals, specifically brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which I'm going to explain in more detail. And this release in chemical contributes to an improvement in cognitive function. So, oh shoot. Yeah. So neurotrophins and exercise. Neurotrophins are a closely related family of protein that contribute to the survival, growth, and maintenance of neurons. And brain-derived neurotrophic factor, it's kind of the king of neurotrophins, and I put that in because it's most of the research heavily focuses on this neurotrophin when I was doing my research, and most of the studies suggest that, you know, influencing the production of BDNF can help prevent cognitive degenerative disorders that impair memory with age by increasing synaptic plasticity and neurogenesis. So that's an added benefit of exercise, is that by increasing or potentially increasing neurogenesis, by increasing these neurotrophins, that you're helping yourself for years to come when you're aging, and then you're decreasing volume in your brain and you're really needing to continue to make, you know, new neurons. And so a little bit more about brain-derived neurotrophic factor is that it promotes the survival of neurons and maintains plasticity. So it's created in the hippocampus primarily, or most of the, you know, specifically there's a region called the dentate gyrus where the BDNF is really being synthesized, and a lot of the so in both human and rodent studies, there was an increase in BDNF regardless of the duration of exercise. However, specific types of exercise can increase BDNF more than others. And that's kind of now what I'm going to be taking a look at, is that you have moderate aerobic exercise is better than intense anaerobic exercise. And there was a study done in rats that kind of grouped these two, a mild, like low stress group for exercise and an intense, like high stress. And what they saw was that the rats in the intense exercise group, they would exceed their lactic threshold, and like by doing that, they would induce the stress response in the brain, which would kind of counteract the benefits of doing exercise in general for the increase in neurogenesis or the increase in the BDNF levels that they would see compared to the moderate exercise group, where they would be able to see this increase in BDNF serum, which would suggest, you know, a neurogenesis. And skill-based exercise that requires focus and task completion increases BDNF and hippocampal volume in humans. So yeah, taking a look at the aerobic exercise, there was a particular study that was really great. It was done, there were MRIs taken before, 6 months into, and 1 year into doing aerobic exercise of older adults with no cognitive impairment. They had a running group and a stretch group for control. And they showed at the end of the year that the hippocampal volume showed an average of 2% increase on both left and right hemispheres in the MRIs. And the stretch group actually showed a 1.5 decrease in volume from their MRIs. And so, you know, this is pretty significant, as this implement of 1 year of mild aerobic exercise can, you know, contribute to counteracting this volume loss that you experience with age. And also in the study, it was found that there is a positive correlation between hippocampal volume and improving fitness levels according to the MRIs, suggesting that as the more you exercise or the fitter you become, the more of this volume that you're gaining and you're not losing. And, you know, the amount of BDNF in the serum extracted was also positively correlated with exercise. So the more you exercise and the fitter you got, the more that they would see these BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factors, in the serum from the extracted participants. So, I mean, there was a direct increase in volume observed. And then I took a look at yoga, which is practiced here a lot in Western societies, and it has a focus on physical posture, breath control, meditation, or specifically hatha yoga, which I looked at. And the long-term yoga experience was positively correlated with increased hippocampal gray matter volume, but it was looking at like more yoga teachers that had practice of more than 6 years. So it's looking at more of a skill-based exercise that could also be aerobic, but I mean, it seemed to be that aerobic was a little bit more efficient at increasing this gray matter volume. Oops. And the number of hours devoted weekly to the focus of posture and breathing when performing yoga movements gave a strong indication of hippocampal gray matter volume, and increased hippocampal volume suggests this neurogenesis. So, and then I took a look at resistance training, and which was not as effective as aerobic exercise or yoga, but the point is to just put in an exercise that's specifically kind of skill-based and takes out this aerobic factor. And so in a study on obese people or having greater than 32% body fat, performed 60 minutes of resistance training 3 times a week for 12 weeks. And there was no decrease in BMI or waist circumference, but there was seen to be a reduction in neuroinflammation caused by obesity, and there was an increase in BDNF levels. So neuroinflammation can make it not a fit environment for the production of BDNF. So by doing the resistance training in these obese individuals, that decrease in neuroinflammation makes it a better environment for a potential increase in neurogenesis. And so ultimately what I found is that the hippocampus is influenced by exercise. This is what the research suggests, is that physical activity influences the creation of new neurons in the hippocampus, and physiological properties of the hippocampus make them more susceptible to behavior-dependent synaptic plasticity. So in this case, the behavior-dependent would be increasing exercise would make the hippocampus, more susceptible to that synaptic plasticity or increase it. And in each study of physical activity, all MRIs suggested that the hippocampal volume had the largest increase. That was another downside also to the studies, that a lot of these studies are being done primarily on the hippocampus, but it has the particular region, the dentate gyrus, which part of the hippocampus showed an increased production of BDNF in the long-term yoga practice, which is the primary, where a lot of research is seeing that a lot of BDNF is being synthesized. So it just gets a large focus by research. And in conclusion, the exercise can be used as a therapeutic strategy to maintain plasticity of the brain and fight the degeneration that occurs with age. And only strong evidence that long-term performance of exercise is sufficient to increase neurogenesis. There was not a lot of strong evidence suggesting that you could do exercise for 1 week and you get this huge surge of BDNF, and then your hippocampal volume is increased like 3-fold, So aerobic exercise also showed the largest increase in brain volume in the shortest amount of time. So, people doing consistently running at like a moderate level for a year were successfully showing this increase in hippocampal gray matter volume, which suggests neurogenesis. And this knowledge can be used to implement exercise into a therapeutic routine for an individual who seeks to prevent volume loss in the brain and prevent degeneration that comes with aging. So yeah, presentation.
All right. Ooh. So yeah, no, that it's very intriguing work. I mean, one of the studies I came across a couple of years ago was looking at like there's a condition called amblyopia, where one of your eyes is kind of lazy and doesn't converge. So people end up just using one eye and kind of ignoring the input from the other eye. And if that happens during development, your cortex doesn't develop quite right. And ultimately the visual acuity, one eye has sharp vision and the other eye has really kind of blurry vision. And then they find that through doing kind of specific exercises, trying to use the eye that you haven't been using, you can try to like rewire the brain and get better visual acuity. And one of the studies I think that was inspired by this kind of work had people doing these exercises of using the eye that wasn't working so well, but some of them just did the exercises on their own, and other ones did them while they were on a stationary bike. So they were just pedaling for a few hours while they were doing these tasks, trying to use this eye that they hadn't been using and where the brain hadn't wired up properly. And there was a huge difference. It was a major effect. The people who were doing this training while they were pedaling had very substantial increases in the visual acuity in their eyes. And the people who did the same training without the physical activity really had very little. So it seems to have, yeah, I mean, it seems to play out in these different ways where it's a very strong effect. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because what you're saying, that's kind of like implementing aerobic activity and task completion. So it's kind of what I looked at.
Yeah, so cool. So more reasons to exercise. And hippocampus is also just fascinating. Like when I first started teaching this class, the dogma was you were born with all the neurons you were ever going to have and you lost them through your life and that was it. And then at some point they realized that's not true at all. There are neurons dividing and mainly in the hippocampus, and then they migrate out and they can make new connections in new places, and the brain became much more kind of dynamic. The hippocampus comes up a lot in terms of this idea of plasticity and repair and things like that. All right, who wants to go next?
Well,
Let's have Chloe. Chloe Burns.
okay. Can you see it? How do I?
Oh, yeah, it looks good. You just have to hit your present or whatever, however you do it.
Hmm.
Oh, I don't see it on there.
Let me pick the other one. Hold on.
But that was not it. All right, maybe. Yeah, play. Probably play.
There we go. So I did the effects of creatine supplementation on exercise performance too. I looked more at consuming creatine supplements and what that does. So a large amount of research has been done on creatine supplementation of exercise performance over the years. It first became popular in the 1990s because it started to be used in the Olympics and it wasn't a banned substance. It is one of the most studied products in the dietary supplements category. And it said that creatine supplementation can potentially improve exercise performance. Creatine is changed into phosphocreatine in the body, which is an important storage of ATP in the muscles. When the muscle contracts, ATP is broken down and energy is produced. The phosphocreatine is a storage for recycling and regenerating the ATP, so energy production can continue quicker. Some background, 95% of the body's creatine is stored in the skeletal muscle, and the other 5% is in the liver, kidneys, and the brain. Increased phosphocreatine supply draws water from other parts of the body, so the more creatine you intake, the more dehydrated you can get, and even though it's naturally made by the body. There are different forms of creatine, such as creatine nitrate, citrate, and monohydrate. And monohydrate is the most studied of all of those, and it's the most ingested. There's no set dosage, and it's not regulated by the FDA. Commonly, people take 5 to 6 grams a day, but it's recommended that they do a loading period, which is 1 week of taking 20 to 25 grams a day split into 4 doses within the day to build up phosphocreatine storage. One study I looked at aerobic, anaerobic trained rats, and 20 90-day-old male rats were split into 2 groups, a placebo group and a creatine group. They trained 5 days a week for 20 days on treadmills, and it was found that the creatine group had better sprint test values and contractile property tests. Another study was on resistance-trained men, and it was on 10 males who were split into the placebo group and a creatine group. They had to do 3 strength training trials, and they were 7 days apart. It showed that their endurance capability was increased. It may have led to this because of muscle hypertrophy in response to the creatine supplementation and the weight training. Another study I looked at was consuming creatine before working out and after working out. And this study took 19 male bodybuilders and split them into 2 groups, one that took the supplement before working out and the other one that took the supplement after working out. They each took 5 grams of creatine immediately before or after exercising. And they trained 5 days a week for 4 weeks, and they had a specific workout regimen and a specific diet. They found that there was no substantial evidence, but taking creatine post-workout may be superior to taking it pre-workout. Safety of taking creatine, as I said, it's not regulated by the FDA, and dosing is different and determined by the individual taking it. The most common side effect that was consistently seen throughout all the trials was weight gain. It said that also people with pre-existing kidney disorders are advised not to take it because it may cause kidney damage. In conclusion, creatine supplementation does improve exercise performance in high intensity bursts like sprints, but not in exercises that involve endurance. It may be more beneficial to take creatine after exercising. Water retention in the muscles may account for muscle gain, and there's no evidence to support any side effects except weight gain. That's it.
Cool. So that's pretty much what you found is pretty much in line with what we've heard before. So it's always a good sign when people look at the same thing and find something, kind of come to similar conclusions there.
Yeah.
So Marissa, you don't have, you can say no, but one of the things we have, one paper was particularly topical. And I thought it would be really interesting to see what Marissa had to say about mental health and COVID-19. Is that something you'd be willing to show us now?
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just thinking.
Well, I mainly focus on COVID-19 and implication COVID-19 has on mental health on the elderly because they're the most vulnerable and the most targeted in this disease. Mental health versus COVID-19 in the elderly. COVID-19, the disease caused by a novel coronavirus, is known to be particularly lethal to older adults with underlying conditions. 80% of deaths associated with the coronavirus in the United States were in adults aged 65 and older, according to the CDC. Growth in the elderly population means a direct increase in age-related diseases such as dementia and poor mental health outcomes such as depression, anxiety, suicide, and serious constraints on quality of life among elderly individuals. Stress is a trigger for depression. Depression is a failure to deal with stress. The stress response itself occurs primarily in the so-called HPA axis, involving the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenal cortex. Ultimately, the adrenal cortex releases glucocorticoids, which have effects throughout the body on metabolism and immune function. Glucocorticoids also help inhibit the response of stress to prevent the amygdala from becoming overactive. Stress activates the amygdala. When active, it releases glucocorticoids, which create a positive feedback loop with the amygdala and a negative feedback loop with the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. If the balance of excitation from the amygdala and inhibition from the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex favors HPA activation, positive feedback loop occurs and chronic stress and depression can result. Stress makes mental illness worse, which can increase the risk of dementia. A study has shown that anxiety can cause brain damage to the brain. Pathological anxiety and stress can lead to structural degeneration and impaired functioning in the hippocampus and the PFC, which may account for an increased risk of developing neuropsychiatric disorders, including depression and dementia. Consequences from social distancing and isolation measures instituted by governments around the world and the neurobiological consequences of resulting stress and inflammation may increase vulnerability and mental stress issues in the population where loneliness and isolation have already been described as an epidemic. Studies of elderly people and social isolation concluded that those without adequate social interaction were to die prematurely. And in the US, older adults aged 85 or older also appear to be higher at risk for COVID-19 associated outcomes. And isolation. Mental health experts say the measures of
I don't think we're seeing your. We're seeing your talking, but I don't know if we're seeing your, because what I'm seeing on your screen is different than the presentation you sent me.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to use this one because I changed it a bit.
Oh, okay. As you were.
Okay. Isolation. Mental health experts say the measures the government is placing to stop a spike in the COVID-19 cases is cutting people off from their family, friends, and therapists, or companion staff who would ordinarily support them. Health risks associated with the virus can be both physically and mentally detrimental for the elderly, including isolation. Although it's important to take this measure, it is leading to loneliness. Loneliness suppresses the immune system as well as aging does. And this prevents the ability to fight off any infection. Social isolation limits access to mental health institutions, preventing those who need physiological help from getting it. We see a spike in depression and anxiety. An article suggests that at-home therapeutics would help with treating mental health through telehealth, where providers remotely communicate with patients. This will result in a drastic change in the approach to mental health. Why loneliness can be fatal in seniors. A study that tracked 6,500 elderly men and women over a 7-year period reported that the lack of social contact leads to early death. One author of the study noted that loneliness was a main factor in contributing to worsen the pre-existing condition of senior citizens. I added the socioeconomic implications because the stressors on the elderly have severely altered the normal lives of senior citizens, causing stress in an already difficult time dealing with age-related issues. I also added this because this is causing seniors to visit the hospital a lot more, which causes a strain on the healthcare system. Implications: fear and anxiety can lead to a decrease in mental health outcomes. COVID-19 is complicating daily lives of older adults. Measures taken to prevent the spread of the virus having severe consequences on the elderly. The elderly are severely vulnerable to the virus, making them more likely to end up in the hospital in isolation. Isolation leads to premature deaths. Okay.
All right, so thank you. Yeah, so it's particularly on the elderly population who are also probably more nervous about dying. And like I can just say from working with my parents, it is a trial just getting them to kind of understand exactly how do you Zoom. So I mean, we can can kind of stay in touch through Zooming, but it's like if someone doesn't even know how to move a mouse around and figure out Windows or something, you're even way more isolated than you are. We're it's so freaking isolated. It's like, imagine if you couldn't use a computer. Oh yeah, no, it's kind of crazy. So it's 12:24. So we probably, unless somebody wants to go quick, we might want to wrap it up and decide to. Does anybody have one last one that they desperately want to share, or we can try to make some time and figure out maybe sometime off the grid where we can meet for 45 minutes and finish these up as well.
I can do mine in 5 minutes if you want.
Okay, so let's have Victoria bring it on home with a discussion of, let me remember what you were doing yours on here.
Healthy lifestyle effects on dementia.
Okay, so health and dementia. So this is also getting into kind of elder kind of thing. So let's go for it.
Can you guys see that?
Uh-huh.
Oh, present. Alrighty, so I wanted to examine healthy lifestyles effects on dementia. My grandma had vascular dementia, and it was kind of crazy just seeing her mind just go because she was such an amazing person and she didn't even remember who I was by the time she passed away. What is dementia? Dementia is damage or depletion of neurons resulting in cognitive impairments. People typically think of memory loss, but there's also includes language impairments and behavior and personality changes. And what's kind of a little bit discouraging is that it's an incurable disease. So I just kind of assumed that it was genetic and eventually it would be developed and it was inevitable. But doing research, the World Health Organization says that by engaging in a healthy lifestyle, you're able to deter the onset pretty much. So what they encourage is exercise, healthy diet, don't smoke, and a reduction in alcohol consumption. So starting with exercise, there are a lot of really interesting studies on this. I know we already discussed some of them, but the really encouraging thing that is learned through these exercise trials are that a fully developed brain is capable of generating new neurons by participating in aerobic exercise. The study that I was examining initially was in the 1990s. They had mice running on stationary wheels, and then the mice's brains developed derived neurotrophic factor, which stimulated neuron growth, and it increased the size of the hippocampus and the cerebral cortex. And I think we all can remember from lectures that those parts of the brain are responsible for short and long-term memory. And then whenever testing memory-related tasks, the mice improved. Okay, so then people expanded on this and applied it to humans. So in an experiment where 120 participants over the age of 55 performed various regimens, there was varying brain growth. They started out measuring people's brain scans through MRIs, and they made sure that the hippocampus was a similar size compared to other participants. And then they gave them specific exercises to complete 3 times a week for the duration of a year. And the people that were in the group where aerobic exercise was prescribed increased their hippocampus size by 2%. The more sedentary groups decreased their size by 1.5%. Alrighty, and so moving on to diet, feeding your brain is so important. Whenever you look at statistics lately, Europe is showing a decrease in diagnosis compared to American diagnoses. A lot of researchers think that it's due to the really poor diets of Americans. A lot of our foods contain heavily processed, it's terrible, but it's high in glucose, oxidizing agents, and just bad stuff. But the literature shows that the countries that are healthier and having a decrease in diagnosis are people that adhere to the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet encourages an increase in fruits, vegetables, and omega-3 fatty acids and whole grains, and they decrease the amount of unsaturated fats, dairy, and meat products that they ingest. There are a lot of comparative studies when examining this, but overall, people saw an improvement in cognition testing and a decrease in cardiovascular risk. The comparative studies really did vary, though. People saw a decrease in risk from 28 to 48%. Okay, smoking is dreadful. It will cut off the oxygen supply to your brain, and then it causes neurons to die. Cigarettes also contain reactive oxygen species, and this includes hydrogen peroxide and peroxynitrate. And this causes oxidative stress on the brain, providing susceptibility to neurodegenerative diseases. The follow-up studies were really beneficial when examining these relationships. There was a measure of 6,070 participants over the age of 55 with no diagnoses. Participants in these surveys varied from smokers, former smokers, and non-smokers. After following up 2 years, the chances of developing dementia were increased. Hang on, let me see. They doubled their chances of development. Other comparative studies showed tripling the chances of development. Sorry, I'm trying to switch to the next slide, but it's not letting me. Ah. It kind of froze on this slide.
This is kind of similar to what you're talking about.
Oh no. That's really funny.
All right. You should go find.
Sorry.
If-
Okay. You see that now?
So are you back online? If you're back online, you can share. Okay. So you have to reshare your screen. I kind of hijacked you here.
Oh, that's okay. Hang on one second. All right. Can you see that?
Okay. There we're good.
Okay. Alrighty. So other studies were showing that you should reduce your alcohol intake. These studies were really interesting because they were doing MRI scans of people's brains, and it showed that an excess amount of alcohol intake depletes your white and gray matter, causing a decrease in cognition. And other journals that were comparatives were, sorry, that's bar keeps on blocking me and changing. That has all of your guys' faces and names on it. Other journals using comparative literature studies found that excess alcohol consumption increased risks of dementia by 17%. Mother F word. It's freezing again.
So we might, given that it is after 12:30, we might want to just call this, and then we can. It would be nice because some of the other people wrote some really interesting stuff that it would be a shame. Minimally, you'll get to see them in the discussions, but it would be nice to hear a little bit more about what people found. We have everything going from, we get things on psychedelics, on meditation, on lots of other things as well going here. So let's, for right now though, I think we should just call it a day.